Hello, Oakley.
Hello, Omar.
How are you doing today?
I'm great today. How are you?
Awesome. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. Mary, Justine, Trisha. Oh, Amanda. It's been a little while since we've seen you. So
Yay.
wonderful to have you back. And Garfield, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. So each week we do a check-in, and I'd love for you to just think about a part of your body that you really appreciate. I've just really been focused on the body, mind, heart connection of late. And I was in this space the last couple of days where I've had this kink in my shoulder. And just today in a conversation with someone, I just realized that I was resisting the moment that I'm in. And literally the moment I acknowledged that resistance, this kink went away. I mean, I have been doing stretching, meditation, foam roller. Nothing was getting this kink out of my shoulder until literally the moment I just admitted to myself that I was resisting an emotion. And I was like, boom, I was, oh man, really? So in this check-in this morning, what is something about your body that you appreciate? Feel free to share either in the chat or access your mic for this check-in today. And we'll put Oakley on the spot first.
Oh, one thing I appreciate about my body, my feet.
Mm.
I really have been far away from exercise, and I'm a pretty big athlete, and so I went to my first Pilates class private. Don't freak out, no exposure. Um, And man, the weirdest part of the entire experience was my feet on the like carousel thing and feeling my arches and my toes in a way that I feel like I was like, "Oh, got legs and my feet work." It was so bizarre. So it was very existential, and I'm really grateful for my feet and where they take me, so to speak.
Awesome. Thank you, Mary. She's sharing her eyes, having cataract surgery in the chat. Anybody else would like to check in?
Yeah, Trisha.
Oh, I was just reading someone's post. I am thankful for my heart, for having gratitude, hearing an airplane, my ears hearing an airplane because I'm flying out tomorrow.
Oh, Denver bound. Thank
Yes.
you.
And sharing her voice, Justine, her psoas. It keeps her honest about how the rest of her body processes grief and joy.
Justine, I know that one. That's so right on for me too.
For those that don't know the psoas, it's literally the muscle that connects your upper body to your lower body. And so it's kind of where your fight flight sort of mechanism is stored, which makes sense because you need to bend your legs to go run if it's flight. I learned it the hard way, lots of marathon running and realizing that my psoas wasn't working. Running a marathon and psoas go really well together. Garfield legs, yes. Anybody else have a check-in on something about their body that they appreciate? Wonderful.
Oh.
Yes, Jen, thank you for bringing us to the very core one, which is our breath, and keeping grounded, particularly when we're anxious. So the homework from last week, for those that were with us, was around practicing social emotions. And so the core one with gthx is the practice of gratitude as a social emotion and being able to pause and take a beat to appreciate it. But in the conversation that came up last week, pride came up and our relationship to pride. Pride is also a pro-social emotion, and oftentimes it gets a bad rap as something. Pride is boastful. Having daughters, I'm thinking of Beauty and the Beast and Gaston. Gaston is like filled with pride and ego. There is also a positive aspect of it, which is something we really can appreciate it and appreciate in other people and the strengths in other people. So did anybody think about pride this week in a different way? Trisha?
More of a pride of lions rather than just being boastful, but being pride of a group, being a member of a group of lions, lionesses, and being surrounded by the lawnmower going, relocating, and to be able to be one of the leaders in the pack of my pride.
That's a great reframing about the community that we're in, and recognizing just the importance of being part of something bigger. I love that. Anyone else think about pride differently this week? All right. Well, today, Oakley is going to get to ask me some questions. 2 weeks ago, I got to ask her some questions, and out the box, she came with ghost stories, which I was not expecting at all, but it is the month of Halloween, so maybe it's apropos. And, you know, this series is really about reimagining your life. Is what are the stories that we tell ourselves? And, you know, Oakley and I are doing these interviews in part to just kind of be as transparent about the story making as possible, and that it's happening in real time. This week I was been focusing on core values, and I started with a list of 50 and then sort of narrowed it down to sort of 17 community values, and then 9 family values, and then 3 sort of personal core values. And the initial values that I came up with for myself were love, service, and joy. And it sounded great. I was like, oh, that's good. I like that. And then yesterday in my Qigong, it was like, no, those aren't your core values. And what came to me was joy, healing, and synchronicity. Synchronicity is a totally new word for me. And it essentially means that there are no coincidences. Carl Jung talked about synchronicity at the beginning of the translation of the I Ching. And the Western mind thinks often in causality, cause and effect. We think we can do this, and then therefore that will happen. And oftentimes our disappointment comes about when whatever it is that we sort of input doesn't create output. And so synchronicity is just something that I've been coming sort of more open to, and just, we can't control it. But these beautiful things can still happen. And then joy and really healing, I sort of think about the opposite of that, which is pain and brokenness. And so I think, to me, the space that we're creating each week here really fulfills that. I'm just, as I'm saying this out loud right now, I'm thinking about the synchronicity of all of you coming from wherever you are in this country at this particular moment on a random Thursday afternoon. And we talked about joy last week, Denise, in our breakout group, and just that beauty of joy. And this, to me, is about healing, and it is about coming together. And there is so much brokenness out in the world. There's brokenness within us ourselves. Talking about our bodies and the beautiful thing that we can heal. So with that, I'll stop so Oakley can actually ask some questions. You see how I try to lie?
You're like, I'm going to talk about my values and
Let me frame her questions before I know
half of
them.
Oakley's questions. Okay. Oh, that was great, Omar. Thank you. Joy, healing, and synchronicity. That's beautiful. Well, hopefully, we'll all get some joy, healing, and feel the synchronicity from this interview. And, it is my great pleasure and joy to put you in the hot seat. So here we are. Welcome, everyone. So, as you know, Omar has been leading these Thursday gatherings for since quarantine started, right, Omar?
Sort of right in the middle of March.
Right in the middle of March. And I had the honor to guest star with you for a couple moments, and then we created more together, and here we are together. And I think what you're probably best known for here, probably friendship with some of these folks, but also just the co-founder of gthx, right?
Yeah.
So let's unpack you a little more, shall we?
Let's.
Let's. So, Omar, we want to humanize you for a moment. Let's just warm up here. And I'm so curious, even as a friend, what is your morning like?
Mm.
Every time you text me by mid afternoon, you've got a million things to say. And then you're like, and I also, through the Qigong, I Ching, and I also baked bread, and I also talked to these people, and I also practiced this, and I also sent my kids to their mom. I'm like, what? What does your typical morning look like?
I wished I had a beautiful set routine. I think it begins with making sure the kids are up and getting ready to get out of the house for school. Even though they're on Zoom, we're fortunate to have two grandmothers that are both within walking distance of our house. And so the grandmothers alternate. And so just kind of making sure that they are out of the house and have some kind of sustenance in them before they leave. Just this week, I was very excited. We got a new coffee maker that is programmable. So it's the best thing now to wake up to the smell of fresh coffee. I didn't know how much I would appreciate that, but being able to wake up now the last couple of days with the coffee brewing is a beautiful thing. And I know that when I go into my Qigong, I should just rely on the life energy that Qigong. Qi means like energy, Gong means cultivation or practice. But straight up, I have a cup of coffee before I do that. And it really helps me kind of just get settled. And so those have been like the three core things that I try to make sure I do each morning is get the kids ready, have a cup of coffee, and practice my Qigong.
That's amazing. So, how long are you practicing Qigong for, just so we know?
So a typical run through is probably anywhere between 30 to 40 minutes. And then depending on how my day goes, yesterday, I actually did an hour and a half. And I just was in a place where I knew I needed to have that focus and groundedness. I think there's a great Zen koan is that on a normal day, you should meditate for 30 minutes. And on a stressful day, you should meditate for 2 hours. And it's that sort of inverse thinking, right? It's usually when we feel like we're stressed, we're like, okay, I don't have time for that. Mm-hmm. And I've just been learning that it's the exact opposite. It's like when I'm feeling stressed, I'm like, okay, I've got to listen to that and double down on these practices.
That's great. We'll come back to the stressors in a little while. But right now, tell us a little bit about what it's been like for you to meet your kids, these two girls. What is it like for you to discover them?
One of my first really clear understanding that things were going to be different was when we just had the one daughter, and I don't know how old she was, maybe 3-4 years old. And I just remember realizing, oh, this is difficult. This is not easy. And I was laying there in my bed at some terrible hour, not being able to sleep. And I was like, you know what? it's not her, it's me. And my heart needs to grow. And I literally felt my heart grow in that moment. It was just this profound feeling at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, like, okay, this is a chance for my heart to grow, and can it grow? And I felt this like just opening. And you're talking to a guy who spent a decent amount of his life in finance and real estate. Like, I was more comfortable in spreadsheets and doing deals and talking about emotions for sure. And so that was one of those kind of the walnut cracking open moments.
That's so beautiful. Thank you. Let's get a full picture of the family and then we'll move into some other things. I think it's really special that you've been able to marry the woman that you have, given how long you guys have been in each other's lives. Can you tell us about that time when you met and how you developed that knowing that she was your person?
Mm-hmm. Well, just as a parent now, I got to realize I only talked about one daughter. So the other daughter, just in case you watch this is on YouTube, I think part of it is realizing they're each their own person and learning to really meet each of them where they are. Yes, 2 days ago, we were walking home from my grandmother's house, or my mom's house, their grandma's house. And my younger daughter was like, Dad, my older sister, she's really good in school and she's really diligent. And I'm kind of a different kid, I like violin and I like my capoeira. And I said, yes, you are a different kid. And it's beautiful that you are doing things that your sister isn't, but you still have to do your homework and you still have to do well in school. And, and so it was just learning to listen and appreciate their gifts, but at the same time, be a parent. My wife and I have known each other for 32 years. We met when we were 14 years old at a summer swim team here in Los Angeles. And we were at different junior highs at that point, and we ended up at the same high school. And then we ended up dating part of 11th and 12th grade. I remember even then a conversation with her about love. And she said that love is unconditional. I was like, what does that mean? I don't understand what that means. And she said, unconditional love means that there are no strings attached. And that's been my definition of love ever since, is that there are no strings attached. It is not logic. It is not, if you do this, then I will love you, right? That's the causality. It's the synchronicity of just being present to anything that is possible. And so we paid our dues. We broke up, the sad breakup at the airport as we went to our respective colleges. She went to the East Coast, I went to Northern Cal, but we stayed friends. And 6 years later, we both ended up back in LA and started dating again. And then, I don't know, 3-4 months later, she gets into law school, back on the East Coast again. We ended up doing 4 years long distance, LA to New Haven for 2 years, Boston to New Haven, Boston to Philadelphia. And so we paid our dues in terms of just making sacrifices and choices. And certainly blessed.
Thank you. It really sounds like your family is a big space for you to open the heart. A lot of talk about love and the heart there.
Yeah, I think it's what keeps us grounded, and I think it's who we are. So, or at least that's who I am.
Right on. So let's go back to little Omar for a minute. And we'd love to hear about some stories that really highlight your childhood for you. one or two that really kind of give us a picture of what growing up as little Omar was like for you.
So I was born in San Francisco, and I think within 6 months or so, we moved to Saudi Arabia, where my dad was. He was studying Muslim cultures around the world. And by the time I was 3, I'd been around the world twice and had lived in Saudi Arabia for a year and a half. We then moved to Washington State. And I just, remember running around outdoors all the time. We actually ended up moving to an Indian reservation for a few years, and I went to school on an island. I used to take a ferry to school every day, and it was a one-room schoolhouse. I mean, there was literally, I think, 30 kids in a K through 6 school, one teacher. Then we moved to Vancouver, Canada, and again, it was in a sort of a communal learning environment. And we moved to LA when I was 10. And so my mom grew up here. And I remember her walking me to elementary school. And we got there and I said, "Mom, how are we supposed to get in?" She said, "What do you mean?" I was like, "There's a fence all the way around the school." I'd never been to a school with a fence around it. I'd never done homework until the 4th grade. And I got in trouble because I didn't do homework. And the teacher was like, "Why aren't you doing homework?" I'm like, "What's homework?" And so, I grew up kind of being the new kid and learning to adapt. And I think those skills of being new to things and learning to adapt have, shaped me in profound ways.
Can you tell us a little bit about how it's shaped you today?
I think there's a Zen practice around the beginner's mind, and it says in the beginner's mind, all things are possible, and for an expert's mind, few things are. And so for me, staying in that pocket of being a beginner and just willing to learn and experience things fresh and new, and not assume just because things have been a certain way that they will always be that way. You mentioned that I've been doing the I Ching recently, and again, just new, but not new. My dad apparently did it, back in the day, and we've been starting to talk about it again. But it said, every beginning there is joy, every ending there is chaos. And so stay in the place of beginnings. And so that's, to me, is just really embracing that idea of coming at things from a fresh perspective and not be afraid of being the master of none.
So, taking this beginner mind, you moved into kind of a career that a lot of us would call notable and competitive, but you kept this beginner's mind throughout. So, can you give us a little peek? And when I say little peek, give us the in-depth dive into this career arc that led you to this sort of moment of change into gthx. And we'll go there in a moment, but paint us the picture leading up.
So
Yeah.
in 92, we had the civil unrest in Los Angeles. I was a senior in high school, and I remember distinctly the smell of the air burning, the smoke, not being able to see the end of my block because there was so much smoke in the air. And just profound realization that our city was fragile, that our democracy is fragile, and a distinct feeling that I wanted to build the world I wanted to live in, having seen everything literally crumble around me at that sort of civic scale. I was driven by this idea of building the world I wanted to live in. And when I went to college, I actually just played sports for the first 2 years. I walked on to the varsity volleyball team and hit a ball 30 hours a week. And then I was in Norway with my dad, who's a geographer, at the World Wilderness Congress. And it was right when the environmental movement was trying to engage young people more. And the keynote speaker said that the connection between youth and the wilderness is that both are uncultivated. And I realized that I was only going to be young for so long. And I quit sports, came back. And it was right when affirmative action and immigration issues were under attack here in California. I got deeply involved in student activism. I slept on the steps of my school administration building for 2 weeks. I did a hunger fast for 3 days in support of immigration issues and affirmative action. We lost all of those things that we were fighting for at the state level. And I remember a friend telling me, you know, Omar, it is easier to fight against things than to fight for things. And so I decided to be on the side of creating the change that I wanted to see in the world. So as opposed to reacting to the change of others. And I kind of took that idea of building the world I wanted to live in literally. And that's in some ways how I ended up in finance and real estate. I was like, well, that's an opportunity to build. And I did it both in private equity and then the last 8 years working on the transformation of the Los Angeles River, which is 51 miles of LA. And having grown up here, I remember when I was first asked to look at that as a job, and a friend approached me about it. I was like, I love you, bro, but I have no idea about what river you're talking about. Even though I grew up in this city, LA is not known for its river.
Wow.
Even though that I know now, Los Angeles is actually named after its river. Downtown LA, which is 16 miles inland. It's probably the only major city in the world that's next to an ocean and is actually 16 miles inland. And it's because of the fresh water of the Los Angeles River that downtown LA is located where it is. And I realized like, this is an opportunity to build the world I wanted to live in at scale and to make a positive impact. And so I spent 8 years helping to build the organization and build the movement around it. And as you know, that culminated in working with the architect, Frank Gehry, and a tremendous number of civic leaders to really reimagine what the next 30 to 50 years of Los Angeles can look like.
Wow. Okay, I'm not going to let you off the hook yet. So here you are having this realization to build the world you want to live in 92, right? That is a really early time in life to declare your overarching vision in which you want to continually live inside of, right? So tell us, Omar, what's one of the biggest struggles that you've had to overcome leading up to this time of gthx under that arc of building the world you wanted to live in? What did you see as a struggle and how did you overcome it?
The Cohen, a beginner's mind, sounds beautiful. It's a very uncomfortable place to be in. Nobody wants to be the person that doesn't know things. You know, we build the world around expertise and knowledge. Knowledge is power, right? We talk about that all the time. And to kind of, you know, go from being an activist to then being a lobbyist, to then being a real estate developer, to being a private equity person, to leading a large scale civic initiative. Like I was always the person that didn't know anything. And that's really uncomfortable. And so I think part of the learning over time is trusting that unknowing and that discomfort. The thing is that it's still, no matter how sort of familiar you are with it, it's still uncomfortable and it's still not sort of a place of joy. You're like, yay, I'm creating. You're like, oh my God, there's so much I don't know. And then just sort of like learning to just sit in that space. I would say, you know, and also it looks like everybody else has been in the field that they're in and they they kind of move up a ladder, and I'm like this sailboat that's sort of zigzagging across an ocean, and sort of like trusting that that's the space to be in, as opposed to sort of building sort of, you know, a fortress and just sort of like continuing to sort of empower that one particular place. It's like, no, I'm going to leave the walls and kind of move ahead.
Amazing. So I'm going to shift from sort of like the linear storytelling for a moment. And I'm going to ask you, if there was one album, music album, that could summarize high school for you,
High school.
what is it and why?
Well, a couple albums come up to mind.
All right.
One is Miles Davis, Kind of Blue. And it was, a friend gave me the CD, and it was sort of my first CD. I was in the era of mixtapes, like literal mixtapes, and I would spend hours listening to the radio and like waiting for the song and then hitting play and then hitting stop, and like it would take days to build a mixtape because you had to wait for the radio song to come on. But I think the other group that really had my heart was De La Soul.
Nice.
3 Feet and Rising. And I think part of it was just their music was so fresh. I mean, I loved rap growing up in LA, but De La Soul just put a totally different twist to it. And it had this funkiness and sort of political consciousness and social awareness that I just resonated deeply with. And there was a whole genre with the Jungle Brothers and PM Dawn. I know Brian feels me on some of this.
So it seems that it just spoke to the archetype in you of this deeper explorer and social justice soldier somewhat, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was, what I loved about it is you had this sort of Public Enemy #1 and that sort of very direct political perspective. But I liked the joy and lightness of De La Soul. Like, I just felt like it could speak to more people, and it had that sense of joy. Sort of kind of is interesting thinking about it in the core values of joy, healing, and synchronicity. I feel like De La Soul, that's what their vibe was about.
That pretty much summed it up. You should tell them that. That's a good one. We'll send them this YouTube. That's beautiful. Thank
They
you.
also throw the best concert. I saw them once up in Santa Cruz, and it was the smallest concert venue possible, and it had the most electric energy I've ever experienced at a concert. So they know how to perform.
Amazing. Noted. So, Omar, what is something that you spend time with in your day-to-day life that no one asks you about?
It's funny, and this is a high class problem. Everybody always assumes I'm going to land on my feet. And so I'll be like, oh my God, this is so challenging. Like, you'll be fine, Omar. My last, I guess, couple bosses ago, somebody who I deeply admired, African-American, who was probably one of the earliest African-Americans to be a partner at a Wall Street firm in finance, and ended up being like deputy mayor of economic development for the city of Philadelphia and a financial advisor. And, and I think this is actually a story worth sharing, is in 2008, I was in finance and real estate, and it was obviously, those were the two worst sectors of that economy. And I got laid off the week before my first daughter was born. And it was a very tough thing to come home to my very pregnant wife and tell her I've got good news and bad news. The bad news, I don't have a job, but the good news, I'm gonna have a lot of time with our daughter. And this friend, he asked me what I wanted to do. And I was like, oh, I'm interested in the intersection of finance, real estate, and sustainability. How do you bring those three things together? He's like, I don't know what that means, but I'll give you 6 months of runway to go figure that out. And he was running a financial advisory firm and kind of gave me the space to go build a practice around that with him. And one of the things that he said, he's like, Omar, I don't know how you always step in shit and come out smelling like roses. And it's one of those things where finding that balance between the joy and the possibility, but also just the challenge it takes to actually do that work.
Absolutely. And if he was here and I could ask him, what did you see in Omar at that time that had you trust him enough, or had you want to give him 6 months of runway? What would he tell me?
I think he knows that I work hard, and that when I focus on something, I put all my energy into it. And I flew over 100,000 miles that year, like the brand new daughter and terrible economy, and so what you see is what you get. I don't BS what I say I'm doing. And so I think that integrity and willingness to do the hard work is probably what he would say, but he would never tell me that. So he's old school.
Yeah.
But that's just what's expected.
Yep. Keeps his cards close.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So I think this is also important to really air is, you had this background, finance, and this whole world of real estate, finances thing. Omar, you're the co-founder of gthx. What happened, man?
So
Tell us.
6 years ago, and I think this is the other point of having two daughters, there would be no gratitude practice had I not had two kids who rocked my world. And I won a fellowship that allowed me to think and travel. It was 6 Angelinos every 2 years are awarded this fellowship who are working on large scale intractable problems. And I told the foundation, look, I want to go on a silent retreat. And they said, Omar, this is not a sabbatical program. This is a program for you to think deeply about how to solve these intractable problems. And I said to them, well, I want to go inward, not outward in that exploration. And they said, fair enough. And so I went on a 6-day silent retreat on the coast of up in Big Sur, up in the mountains. It was the first time I'd ever done anything like that. And I'd never given myself the permission to do that. I felt like my worth was only based on what I did and what I accomplished. And sitting silent did not feel like I was achieving what needed to get done in the world. And I didn't have some profound experience where it was like this epiphany, like, ta-da, light bulb flashing. But I did realize how impatient of a human being I am. And at the end of the week, I got to talk to this monk. And I said, look, the only thing I really realized in this week is just how impatient I am. And he laughed as he put his hand on my shoulder. And he said, the root word in Latin for impatience is patis, which means to suffer. And so he said, that's your burden to carry. I was like, that's terrible advice, feedback. I don't know, but thanks. And it's been actually pretty beautiful because the impatience is always trying to accomplish. The impatience is the causality of wanting to do something and then see the reward of it immediately. And I think the journey that I've been on, and I think, leaving the work on the Los Angeles River as the founding executive director was really challenging and difficult. But after that 6-day retreat, I meditated every day, twice a day for 6 months. And at the end of it, I realized that I was even more stressed out than I was before, because now I was trying to like tack on this additional 40 minutes to everything I was doing. I then started to focus on mindfulness, which was just the simple act of noticing change. So instead of like trying to carve out time in my day, let me just be present to change. But all that was just still in my head. And it wasn't until I stumbled into the practice of gratitude that I learned to just pause and to appreciate the good in my life. And it was just that little bit of a pause. It wasn't 6 days. It was just a fraction of a moment. And then all of a sudden, I actually became more patient. I became a nicer dad, a better human being. I shared that journey with a friend who's my co-founder, Glenn, who happened to be the former head of digital for the Oprah Winfrey Network. And so had a great appreciation for the space. And he said, we should build an app around that. And I was like, I have no idea what that means, but sure. And, one thing led to another. And here we are.
So if someone was in your position with kind of an inspiration that they were holding close, and they were paused at manifesting it or bringing it forth into the world, having walked that bridge from this idea to actually having an app that is living and making a difference for people, what advice would you give that person?
This week, I've been reading a little bit of Ralph Waldo Emerson, his book, Self-Reliance. And this one line jumped out at me, which is, the inner work becomes the utmost work. So my advice would be to trust that inner work. And when that inner work can become the utmost work, that's when I think we can see it manifest in the world. And it's hard because we want to work backwards. That's how my brain, it's how I was sort of quote unquote successful. Before I was really good at sort of envisioning where I wanted to go. I mean, think about what a real estate developer does. They envision a project, then they go buy the land, they go raise money, they go get permits, they go convince everybody this is a great thing, and then they go build it. And it's, and management training, they call it backwards planning, right? And it's that deep assumption that the world is causal based. I can work backwards from whatever it is I want and go build it. And I have been learning really to understand what those intentions are, but to just sit in the pocket of just being in that moment, and that the work is really inside. And I shared recently that the Qigong and the meditation have really been like rain dancing for me. And that idea of rain dancing, again, this comes from reading the I Ching. A farmer doesn't just wait for the rain, right? A farmer has a choice. I plant the seeds. Now, do you wait for the rain and just be like, when's the rain going to come? And you sort of get angry or antsy? Or do you dance from a place of joy and actually feel the rain inside you already and become in harmony with it? And that's what I kind of realize, is that when you're dancing, when that farmer is dancing for the rain, they actually can feel the rain in themselves already. And so when it does actually rain, they're in harmony with where the world is, as opposed to if you've been upset or angry or stressed out about the rain not being there. And then when it does rain, are you even ready for it? Because now you actually have to like shift your energy to be in that place of it's now raining. And so for me, and my, I guess the advice is, whatever it is that you want to rain down, you actually have to trust that it will rain down.
And what I'm also hearing you say is that trust, you can nurture that trust by doing the rain dance, by embodying what you believe is to be.
So the beautiful synchronicity of the two practices that I've kind of come into right now, which is around the Qigong, which is about life force, and the I Ching, which is about intention and the book of changes. There's a saying that E guides Qi, intention guides force. And I think too often we focus on force guiding what we want to happen in the world. And it's the intention that is actually guiding our force. For me, my favorite poem, which, in the gthx app and written, is The Uses of Not from Lao Tzu. I won't say the whole poem, but the one sort of stanza that I'll say is, hollowed out clay makes a pot. Where the pot's not is where it's useful. I believe that we are each pots, and pots are the form of how we hold the world. But our form is just a mere embodiment of our function, and our function is our purpose. And I think that we're not even actually the pot, but I think we're just the hollowed out clay. When we can live like hollowed out clay, it means we can actually take many shapes and we can become many things. And when we're connected to our intention and our purpose, then we're actually not caught up in the form that we're holding, and we can create the space to become whatever it is that we need to be.
All right. Thank you, Omar. Final question for you today, maybe, unless I'm inspired. But final question here. I'm imagining that this ability to articulate the opening within has grown for you. Can you share with us just your opening? What's the last year been like for you on this journey, running an app so different than your former life? How has it opened you within?
It's a nice small question.
Yeah.
2020, pandemic, social protests. Yesterday I woke up and I had no meetings in my calendar. And it was the scariest feeling for me. I was like, oh my God, I have no meetings in my, what am I doing with my life? Right? Like, this is not like, how am I supposed to get anything done if I have no meetings in my calendar? And that's when I was like, okay, just double down. And so that's why I did an hour and a half of the Qigong. And then I reached out to a friend who I think has had a similar journey. She, in 92, actually, this is full circle. She was one of the spokespeople that talked about, she was a Korean American civil rights lawyer. And she was really the face of healing the tension between the African American community and the Asian community post riots. And she ended up getting appointed by President Clinton to a commission on race to really look at race in America. And, and then she walked away from all of it and became a Zen priest and a mediator. And so I called her, or I emailed her yesterday. I was like, hey, I would love some advice. And she's like, I can actually talk to you today. And I was like, amazing, because my day is wide open. So I had this amazing conversation with her about being in this space of openness. And she's like, you're in the right space, Omar. The fact that I couldn't be doing what I'm doing right now if I was leading a large scale initiative. There'd be too many demands on my time and energy, and we'd be scrambling to sort of figure out how to adjust to this new world order. And the fact that we've created something that's digital, that's in round wellness. It is a startup, so we're all figuring out, and everybody's figuring it out. And so it's been a blessing. And at the end of my call with her, she's like, Omar, I'm jealous of you. Right? This is a Zen priest. I was like, she's like, yeah, that's envy. You are in this space, and it is beautiful that you are using this emptiness to really figure out your practices. And that's the work. She's like, I could tell you some story about how I went from being that civil rights lawyer to where I am now, but I'd be making it up. And so just know that you're part of community, and that's what matters.
Mm.
And that's, to me, what's so beautiful about this space is that we're in community, and to know that we're not alone in this work, and to trust that the inner work is the utmost work. What more beautiful thing is than that?
Well, that was my last question. Is what's your greatest hope for this space?
Yeah. I would love if anybody has questions, or, because this honestly, and not to speak for Oakley, but this is the joy, is that we can do this not just with each other, but open it up to people, no matter where they are in their journey. It's just the fact that they recognize, or you recognize, that you are on a journey.
Mm-hmm. Well, Omar, I just have to say thank you for kind of gracing all of us with this journey of the beginner's mind and learning to be in the present moment, because I think that is where life lives. And so thank you for being that devoted to life, and for reminding us of our own devotion to life that lives right inside the present moment and in the breath. Um, and I will open it up for one or two questions if anybody has any for our man in the hot seat right now. And Trisha, yeah, you can open it up. We'll just do
I
two
just
questions.
I just have wanted to say namaste to and satu to Omar in regards to his journey, and he's doing an excellent job. Y'all are doing an excellent job here on gthx, and I'm very grateful, and my heart is filled with gratitude at this moment, and I just want to share that and say thank you, Omar.
Thank you.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Thank you, Trisha, so much. Anyone else wish to express or ask a question? Denise?
I just have to say, I have known where I wanted to go my whole life. I have always never was in question. I knew what I wanted to do next, and I went after it, and I went and got it, and I got it done. And I don't know right now, to touch on what we talked about last week. And everything you've been talking about gives me permission to not know, because that's really foreign for me. And at midlife, it's in current scenario, it's a big question, and what's next. And I did a little meditation yesterday about kind of what's next, and it was envisioning from the ocean this was a wave, but then it was something else coming toward me, and what was that? And it was my higher self, and it just kept the form of a wave, but a really powerful wave. And I had to ask my higher self what its message was, and it was go with the flow.
That's awesome.
Wow.
And now you're saying that it's just like the universe right now, when I listen, it's like, okay, here you go. And it's still hard for me to embrace that, but this is another moment of getting clocked over the head with exactly the message. So thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
That's such a perfect summary. Denise, thank you. That's so powerful. It is the time, isn't it? Omar's reminding us of the present moment and that surrender of going with the flow.
Well, that's
And yeah, go ahead.
where we realize that emptiness is not empty, stillness is not still, in that your not knowing is actually your knowing. Right? You're not knowing what to do is what you're supposed to know right now. Whoa, there you go. You talked about devotion, Oakley, and Mary Oliver, the poet, says that attention is the beginning of devotion. And so what we pay attention to is what we're devoted to. And I think in this moment of COVID, it's just been this powerful shift, because if you think pre-COVID and Instagram was about getting noticed, and now it's about really paying attention to what we're noticing. And that's a big shift, to go from like, I'm trying to get noticed. How many followers do I have? How many likes do I have? And what do I need to like become in order to go get that? And we're now being invited, maybe with a slap in the head, to really be like, okay, what am I actually paying attention to? What is it that I am noticing? And where is my where my sort of intention goes my attention.
Mm-hmm. That's it. And when we walk around pretending to know, we cut off that source of growth and possibility. And I think it is challenging. It's been challenging for me in my life. And I think in our culture, in this culture of the US, there's a real expectation of knowing. You should know. You should know the answer. You should get going. You should be in action. You should know more of the answer. Keep going. We only want experts at this table, And so how can we exhale into that unknown, and on the inhale draw in something new that we've never known before? So that learning is so beautiful, and we're all in such growth right now. And that looks sometimes like the burning of the phoenix, the not knowing. Amazing. So let's end today with a bit of a meditation together. And Omar, I'll start it and then pass it off to you to close, if that feels good to you.
Sure.
Okay, great. So let's all just get comfortable, and I'll invite everybody to close their eyes. And just take a deep breath in and exhale fully. So you reach the bottom of the breath. And then inhale consciously and slowly to fill the belly, the mid chest, and the upper chest all the way into the shoulders. And pause at the top of that just for a moment. And then exhale slowly until you've emptied out all the way to the bottom of the breath again. Empty shoulders, chest, and belly. And now inhale fresh breath all the way in, sipping in the air to fill the belly, the chest, and even the shoulders. And release that breath and come into your own rhythm of inhaling and exhaling. And with your intention, I'll invite everybody together to move the awareness into the heart space. And in that heart, begin to see a tiny seed of light. And with each inhale and each exhale, this tiny sparkle of light begins to grow until it fills the chest. And I'll invite each one of us to send a cord of light into the middle of the group and see a huge sphere of light that begins to beat in synchronicity with our hearts. Just one heartbeat. Inhaling and exhaling. And allow yourself to receive the vitality and the love from this heartbeat, knowing the truth of how deeply connected we are, how deeply intertwined we are. And how we are never alone. And Omar, I'll pass it over to you to take us home.
This week, I invite you to look at what you don't know as a light, as that portal for you to enter and illuminate what you don't yet see. Thank you.
And we hope to see you all next week as we follow up on this journey of not knowing and explore what that's like for all of us. In the meantime, have a beautiful week.
Cheers.